Let's go on to the Chicago Bulls, our season preview. For one of the more bleak teams, as we texted about, I think multiple times while we were doing our prep here, and then again right before we hit record, like this is up there with Washington or down there with Washington as just going to be a rough watch to a degree and not a lot of great optimism for the future. My most important player to start us off is Zach LaVine. I don't think there's a lot to be said about Zach LaVine that hasn't been said. They're obviously shopping him. We didn't mention Chicago in the Lillard conversation, but they're kind of lurking there. It seems like they want to get off of LaVine's contract. But as far as what he is as a player, the thing that jumped out to me watching a couple of their games back, including the play-in game where he actually was pretty good, is he really still feels like he's best as a finisher. And I don't mean finisher like at the rim. I mean a play finisher. He just hasn't become the level of passer, of breaking down the defense from the perimeter with his dribble and turning that into a great shot consistently. That's just not there for him in the way that it is for the other best guards in the league. And I think that's why their team is not as great as you would like it to be. That's why he hasn't lived up to his contract. Then, of course, the defense isn't great, but I think we talk about Zach LaVine as if he's kind of right there, but he's just like a ball hog or this or that. The conversation to me, it should just be that he can't create advantages for his team in a way that drives an awesome offense. And that's a big problem for how much money he's making and for whatever this team's going to be. So I don't think he can change that this year, but I guess that's like the point I want to make about LaVine and why I think it's going to be so hard to deal him if they want to.
Yeah, I think he is someone that I could see being really great on like a third team. It's like a third star on like a good team, but I don't think he should be the driver of like a great team. I think the situation in Chicago, we've seen what that is. And it's like sort of he is my answer for most important player was him or DeRozan. I think it's just you pick whichever one you think is just gonna kind of walk into a bigger year that kind of drives the version of success this team has kind of put itself in the corner of.
Or who you think's more likely to get traded.
Well, and like I would answer that this way. It's like LaVine, if I was a team that had a longer window, I could talk myself into it. Like if I was like, I wouldn't do this if I'm the Kings, but like I could see that like a team like the Kings that is just kind of starting. You could be like, can we talk ourselves into this because he's a little bit younger and all this stuff. With DeRozan, it's like the Lakers are like would just be like that. That's the kind of team where he would make more sense to. Like they think they feel different needs, but they're both kind of filling a similar role on this team where it's like handle the ball, score a bunch. We'll try to support you on defense, and maybe that can get us to like 40 wins even without Patrick Beverley. So I might have to say most important player. It's either LaVine or no chuckle up the Pat Beverley thing. Because I don't know if you looked at the lineup data on this, Brendon. The Patrick Beverley, like, bonkers.
He was great last year. I actually, like, he made a whole fuss because he likes to do that about not being brought back. But low-key, don't think he has a point. Like, the small lineups with him and Caruso, and then the Bulls fans call them the mid-3. I don't know if you've ever seen that, which is just elite. But the small lineups with Caruso, Beverley, and the mid-3 were really good. So I think Beverley, I mean, they replaced him with Javon Carter, right? But yeah, but again, the difference between DeMar and Zach is DeMar is a creator. It's mostly for himself. I mean, he's improved as a passer, but it's mostly for himself, but he can stand at the elbow and create a shot you feel good about. Zach LaVine, it's like, often if he's getting to the basket, which he did improve his rim frequency this past year, but a lot of the times that's coming off of he's attacking a broken defense. He's doing it off of a spot up. He's doing it in transition. He's doing it off of the handoff, whereas DeMar, it's like he can do it. So which of them has higher trade value to you? We have DeMar making $29 million on an expiring contract versus LaVine making 40 this year, 43 next year, 46, and then 49. So he's under contract through 2027, and he is younger, but he is, what's his age? Great. Cleaning the glasses, cutting off. 29 years old. You think it's LaVine? I do not think it's LaVine. I think LaVine is as close to untradeable as you could possibly get right now. Injury history.
Is he in the
peaked as a player,
contract?
cannot play defense. Yeah, I think he might be up there as far as the most untradeable contract in the NBA. Not that I think DeMar has a ton of trade value either, but
it's like 1 year. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, I think you're right. Boy, that's
I guess
tough.
it's the Lakers, but what
Clippers?
reason do they really have to do that? Sure. Yeah.
Brendon, here's the thing that I think is just a universal rule of the NBA. Sometimes you will think a team doesn't need to go get another ball handler and score type, and then they'll be like, but yeah, we do. And they do it.
He will be
And
on
I
another
love
team
DeMar.
before the end of that contract. Like, LaVine will be moved. Like, I'm not saying untradeable is always goofy. It just means you have to attach something to him. Right?
I mean,
You gotta
Bradley Beal got
give
traded.
a pick. Yeah, exactly, right? Usually you have to give up a pick or something crazy has to happen. Nobody's literally untradeable, but yeah. It's rough, but you had LaVine as well. So I hate to move the conversation to trade so quickly, but like with Lonzo Ball hurt and everything, it's like what else is there?
Yeah. I agree.
All right. Player we're talking about by the end of the season. I have Patrick Williams, and I'm actually kind of excited to talk about him. I think he is a bright spot for this team, and because he is so young, I do still buy some of the potential here. I know that he's been relatively disappointing. He probably got overdrafted. I think Chicago's eyes got a little bit bigger, than they should have with this guy pre-draft coming out of Florida State. But that said, his role has just fluctuated a ton. I think if you can just use Patrick Williams as a more athletic version of like a Jay Crowder, Dorian Finney-Smith, Marcus Morris, like these defense-first fours who can shoot enough, and he is more athletic and bigger than most of those guys, like that's a valuable starting caliber player in the NBA, and he's, again, still 22. So they've used him at center more lately. He's started to kind of level out as a shooter, it feels like. He's not trying to score off the dribble and that type of thing quite as much. Like, if they can just mold him into what he's going to be in the future, and I think they can this year, I like him. So I guess all hope is not lost for the Bulls. Who did you have?
I have Patrick Williams as well. I don't know who else you're picking on this team. Like, honestly, that is much. This is as much about like still believing in something that Patrick Williams can be like a contributing player on a good team because he has the skill set and the size that like every team, some other team should be trying to like rehabilitate. Like you could tell me he got traded tomorrow to like the Pacers or like the Heat or like the Grizzlies or just someone else that's a little bit further along. Mm-hmm. And they're just like they figure it out with him for whatever reason, or like pick a team with a great player development. Like he went to the Thunder and he just like became like useful for them. Like okay, like wouldn't doubt it. There's not another young player on this team that I'm like, sign me up. There just isn't. Who else could you even talk yourself into? Dalen Terry didn't really show you like much as a rookie.
That's a rough
The rookies
one.
are
he
not.
got drafted more recently than Patrick Williams, and we're already saying like, yeah, probably not. That's a whiff. They loved it, as I think we talked about with Jack McMullen from the Just Sports family once. Like they pick exactly that player in every single mid-first round for as long as Bulls fans can remember. It's Denzel Valentine, it's Chandler Hutchinson, it's Dalen Terry, and honestly, like going for broke with Patrick Williams, fantastic. Like why not? So let's put it this way with Patrick Williams. Can he be better than these two guys who have already gotten paid? DeAndre Hunter, Keldon Johnson. Could he have a better career on a winning team than those guys in the long run?
Does he have a gold medal? No.
Nor a national championship, which DeAndre has.
He's just in Charlottesville. Nice town. I get why college basketball players maybe go there. It's a cool place. I'm going to say yes, but like, would I be confident in that? No. Like, Keldon Johnson has, like, his limits, but he's at least, like, we kind of at least more know what he is, and there's been a little bit more production. And DeAndre has a little bit more volatile.
Yeah, that's the one thing Keldon has done. Yeah. Scored.
And, yeah, and with DeAndre, there's, I think, like, certainly maybe more intrigue and upside, but it's been a little bit more volatile and up and down. We're going to talk with, he's going to come up as a teaser when we talk to Brett Rowland for Wednesday's show about the Atlanta Hawks. He's going to come up in that conversation. I am guaranteeing that. So I would say yes, but I wouldn't feel confident in that. I wouldn't feel confident in making that bet. Would you take him or would you take like Jalen Johnson?
Patrick Williams or Jalen Johnson?
Yeah.
Probably Patrick Williams because I think he started playing like he needed to be a good spot-up shooter sooner, maybe. You know? Like, whereas Jalen Johnson, it's like, I still don't know if he's at the point in his career where he's morphing into what he's going to be as the best version of himself, and I guess that's why the optimism is there for me with Patrick Williams in a way that I picked Hunter and Keldon specifically, one, because they've already gotten paid and their contracts are an interesting blueprint, especially as Williams heads into extension talks right now, but also because those guys, what's holding them back is they hunt for their shot too much, both of them, Keldon and DeAndre. So I kind of like, you know, it's not to say Patrick Williams doesn't do that, but I like the version of him that, as I compared the Crowder, the Finney-Smith, the Marcus Moore, there's a ton of examples you can point to. It's like if he just is that, but like a touch more athletic, and that's a good player. So whereas those guys, it's like, can you please get out of the mid-range and stop taking pull-up jumpers? Like, please, you know? So, but you mentioned the Pacers. I had the question in my notes, what happens if Patrick Williams is the move for Indiana over, we know they pursued DeAndre Hunter. They obviously ended up getting Obi Toppin. Like, take Patrick Williams out of Chicago, I think we maybe feel even more excited if he's next to a point guard like Halliburton and has a center like Turner. Like, so that's part of my intrigue as well, is like you said, maybe he gets traded. I just think the potential is there, I guess, at the end of the day, in a way that some of these other guys, I don't think it is.
I mean, he is 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He literally is like, he just turned 22.
Yeah.
This isn't like this is.
He's played 3 NBA seasons and he just turned 22.
Yeah.
That's why you draft somebody like that, right? Like,
and there is probably something to be said if we talk to teams about it, if we talk to organizations about it, like, if they were to answer about this, it'd just be like, look, like, is there something sometimes challenging and troublesome when you draft someone that young? Like, is there like development being missed when like they aren't coming to you at 20? You know, when you get them so young, is there something that like can be harder about this and less linear, and then you're making financial decisions in it, so it feels a little bit different than it might have 10 years ago? I think there's something to the idea that like, drafting someone as young as he was when he came into the league, as high as he did, there just are going to be warts. And this was a COVID draft. I mean, I think there's something to be said that like you come into the draft when he did, the year he did, that's not exact. That wasn't the easiest time in the world to be like a normal rookie.
Yeah, I mean,
that draft class, and that just,
I think the bigger issue is that he was a late riser out of absolutely nowhere and went from like, maybe he'll go in the lottery to like, okay, like, hopefully you turn into a star because your draft status indicates you kind of have to for it to be worth it. You know, like, going fourth overall was not in the cards for him when the pandemic hit, for instance. And then by October, when the draft happens, all of a sudden it is. Yeah. I think more of the season should be about him, but I also know that, like, they have DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine for now. They just paid Nikola Vucevic, so they're not going to just turn this whole thing into a development crusade. They have Alex Caruso. They have Javon Carter. They have Torrey Craig. Like, this team wants to win, so maybe that helps him, like I said, solidify a role, but it is still going to be a little tough for him to kind of know and fit in and everything else with so many vets around. Let's go on to best lineup. Last year, their best high-volume lineup was, again, as I said a second ago, Beverly, Caruso, LaVine, DeRozan, Vucevic. Who do you got for them this year?
For this, I went Caruso, LaVine, DeRozan, Williams, and Vooch.
Okay.
I like, what else are you supposed to do here? It's like, give me the guard who can defend, put the two guys that you're banking on to score, put Pat Williams in there to be your kind of wing defender, and then Vooch can space and do Vooch stuff, and there you go. That's the recipe. And the versions of this team that work are going to have 2 or 3 of these guys on the floor at all times. Like, they're going to be very dependent on these 5 guys being competent and healthy all year.
Yeah, I know we argued about Vucevic plenty when the contract came out. I think he's underrated. I think he's a perfectly serviceable starting center. I think he's getting paid what he should. I think defensively, like, I tend to judge this stuff. It's like, okay, is he a great postseason defender? Probably no. Is he more of an 82 game than a 16 game? Yes. But if he's been part of a top 10 defense in a way that's not super fluky, and he's so versatile on offense, like, the guy plays like a wing on offense. He's on the perimeter. He's behind the 3-point line at all times. He's driving to get his layups. He's taking threes. He's playing the dribble handoff game. Like, I think that he is pretty good, and I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know, maybe he has a little bit of positive value on the contract, maybe like next year. I'm not sure about that, but at least neutral. I think he's somebody who can play on a good team. My best lineup, I mean, you said what else could you do? I just did the same thing as last year's, but put one new guy in who is kind of their replacement for Beverly. So my best lineup for the 2024 Chicago Bulls is Alex Caruso, maybe the best guard defender in the NBA, and somebody who, if he starts to take even a few more threes, gets even more valuable. Contract is awesome, but that's not super important. Javon Carter, their replacement for Patrick Beverly, basically. You worry about if he can guard bigger the way that Beverly does. Beverly can guard forwards. Can Carter? Probably not, so that will limit them, but he's also a better shooter. Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, they have to be out there. That is where their offense is going to come from. Ceiling's probably pretty low, but we know what they are. They've driven good teams in the past. Nikola Vucevic, very underrated player. I think he can move the ball. I think he can be an anchor of a serviceable defense at 7 feet tall and plays smart on both ends. Innings eater, but good. As much as like they made the play-in and stuff, like that is pretty grim still, Chris, I think. Like, even if we're both trying to make our little optimistic cases about the 5-man units we've selected, it's also just like, okay, well, we know what the ceiling is. So what's your best case?
The best case is that somehow the defense that was 5th last year, like, the defense was 5th, and I understand, like, I've read enough and like to listen to people talk about this where I think I kind of understand why, but it still just feels like bizarre to me to say the Bulls had the 5th ranked defense last season. I think you have to hope that carries over, even with some of the personnel changes, and that like that carries them to a lot of wins, and then they just score enough to make it all work. That this was a team that, with I think buoyed by that defense, was 4-ish wins better than their numbers suggested. So like they're based on their net rating and stuff, they should have won 4 more games than they did. But that's to me, Brendon, the thing with the best case, in a way that I don't think is the case with teams. I think some teams better than them, and then I think also teams with better young talent below them. I think their best case is just very thin, and there's like one path they can take, and I don't think I think that's like, as much as we talk about like the middle, quote unquote, where you don't want to be, and maybe this is just what happens when you're in the middle. I think when your path to success is basically one path, one way things can go, and you don't have a lot of outs, I think that's when you get really stuck, and I think that's where I feel like the Bulls are right now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I just, to me, like, their best case has actually nothing to do with winning. I mean, what you're describing was last year.
Yeah.
So
are you? And is
look
that
what
repeatable?
That was? I mean, it doesn't even really matter if it's repeatable, because like, is anybody really going to say that's a best case, right? Like, so I just went the other direction. I said best case is Chicago finally trades LaVine and DeRozan, faces reality to get some actual young talent in the door, even if they don't fully bottom out, i.e. they probably keep Vucevic, they probably can't move Lonzo, etc. But and then I had worst case, they chase the middle again, get a mediocre draft pick, and still have no clear vision for the future. Like, they just have to get honest with themselves.
That, Brendon, that you're saying the thing that most NBA teams just like seemingly refuse to do.
It's you're saying teams. We know who it is. It's the old guy who runs things, right? It's the old guy with the money. That's who doesn't want to get bad.
Sure.
In every case, yeah. I'm not even saying Chicago. I mean, I think it's like a testament to a good GM if they're able to convince an owner to be bad.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's fair. I just here. Let me ask you one thing. What do you from last year defensively, with all of these we've said, and like even with the Pat Bev stuff, and Jim and Conquer? What about is this team? Do you think they can go back to just being a top 10 defense? I'm not even going to say top 5 again, but can this team be a top 10 defense again? Okay.
Yeah, because, so they're deep and they're old, right? So that helps off the top. Not old, but they're veteran, right? So like Javon Carter, Torrey Craig, those guys have now been brought in to fill some of what they lost. They have Vucevic, who, again, I think is serviceable enough. They also still have Andre Drummond. So that is a floor that is hard to ignore. Teams shot poorly on corner threes against them last year. So we were talking about that we will be talking about that with the Pelicans after this. But they turned teams over at a really, really high level, which a lot of that, again, was Beverly and Caruso. They rebound really well, whether that's Drummond or Vucevic, and they just contest, like they switch 1 through 4. Drummond and Vuce are more mobile than like your average center, all things considered, like more mobile than a Yusuf Nurkic, who we were just talking about with Phoenix, right, or something like that. So, I mean, obviously a lot of this stuff is variable, but I think as long as they can force the turnovers and rebound, I do kind of trust that. I don't know if it'll be, top 5, okay, like maybe whatever, but they could be top 10. They could be at least definitely top half of the league, I would think. Because, like, at the end of the day, LaVine and DeRozan, I think DeRozan's fine. I think LaVine, it's like he's a pretty bad defender, but okay, like he's guarding the 4th best option. Like, how much damage is he really going to do,
Yeah, it becomes more of a problem when you have to like scale that up to like win real games, and that's just not in the cards here. Like if they are like if they like end up as like the 6th seed and they got like the Cavs in round 1, then that's a problem because then like Mitchell and Garland are just gonna run over you. Or if you play like the Heat and they get Dame and they have Dame and Jimmy, or you play Toronto and they have Dame and Scotty, like then you're kind of screwed. But
yeah, I mean, that's what happened in the play-in, right? They had to have Caruso try to guard Jimmy, and it's just like, that was it. If he wasn't going to stop him, then like nothing they could do scheme-wise, personnel-wise was really going to get the job done. I actually do think Patrick Williams played pretty well against Siakam and OG in the first play-in game. Back to him for a minute. But yeah, so I have over 37.5 for some of these reasons. They were a 44-win team last year, which I think you said. They've been on at least a 38-win pace each year that they've had DeRozan. So this era, since they signed DeRozan the past 3 years, they've been on a 38-win pace. One or two of those was a COVID season. And again, the depth, the veteran floor raisers are just there. I think if Caruso can be good enough, if Carter can be good enough, that's kind of like the one hinge piece. But it just feels like they can be what they were last year, to your point. So why would they not hit the over again?
I'm going to go over as well, but I think it's like 40 wins.
Yeah.
I
don't think they'll be. Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah.
It's going to be barely over. They're not going to be like a real threat. And I would also just say they are one injury from like one of their key guys away from this just collapsing. That is very much in play. If LaVine misses 4 months with an injury, if DeRozan gets hurt, or if they make moves and just exit all these guys out as another path, then you look at a real under and you look at a real reset, which like honestly like might be the healthier thing for the franchise in some ways from like a non-revenue standpoint. But if they run this through and see this through,
it's wild that they were nearly a bottom 5 offense with those two guys.
But Brendon, that doesn't feel wild to me because think about what those guys are. As good as they are making shots, what do we know about, like, as much as like shot making and the skill of one-on-one creation is fetishized, and it's super important because of what it means for you in the playoffs. It's not really the best way to, and based on what we know, and I think in just my opinion, to sustain really good regular season offense. It just isn't. And like unless you're so elite at it. Like, you can do it if you have LeBron and Kyrie circa like 2017 and a bunch of shooters. You can't really do it if it's LaVine and DeRozan in 2023.
Well, that's the thing that they don't have. is the shooters. That to me, that's
Right.
That's the big answer, and especially in the regular season. To your point, they don't have guys to space the floor, guys for kickouts. Some of their best players defensively aren't as good offensively, etc. And they're two players who are their stars. Again, I mean, LeBron's like a terrible example to compare somebody to, but like they don't get to the line either, LaVine and DeRozan. So you're really talking about a heavy diet of contested jumpers. And you're right, that's a tough recipe, but it's just a very strange team.